Jesus, you are our great high priest. Gather us all now at the foot of your cross. Help us to meditate on the sacrificing love you give to us in your darkest hours and through your death. Amen. Good Friday. A Good Friday unlike any other, and one that certainly will be seared in all of our minds for many years to come. The disruption of our lives right now, even if we found routines that bring us some level of comfort and structure in this new, I guess now after all of this time, not so new world of social distancing and shelter-in-place orders, is disorienting and just plain strange. No, it's not the Holy Week any of us envisioned, yet here we are, working hard to maintain the intimacy of our communion with one another. We've been pushed to learn how to be the church via the internet, and we find that we're amazed and pleased at the ingenious ways that we've discovered in order to worship together, yet not together. It's still all a bit surreal, like almost an out-of-body experience in many ways, but we do what we can to find joy and peace every time we participate in the various services offered. And certainly, while we at all hope to be physically together with our church families for the holiest of days, whether we like it or not, we just have to continue our learning and push our comfort level even further in order to observe these holy days a bit differently. No doubt, it's definitely harder to get our hearts and minds wrapped around the spirit of Holy Week, but at this point, and simply put, it is what it is. And so we move forward. It doesn't matter that the majority of us were palmless on Palm Sunday. We could still share in the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. Sure, we missed the ritual stripping of the altar or the squirmy indecision about whether we should get our feet washed on Maundy Thursday. And I know for certain that our clergy missed not having their annual renewal of vows service. But unfortunately, and again, it simply is what it is. The age-old customs and rituals that we're all used to, comfortable with, but unavailable to us, still can't stop Good Friday from arriving. In all of the chaos that this raging pandemic has created, the chaos doesn't cancel out or overtake our holy journey. We can look at this time as a gift of God's mercy and grace that helps us move to be more aware and to be unafraid to explore our faith deeper than we ever expected or anticipated. Maybe it could be that these days can help us to acknowledge and confess our absolute inadequacy before God, to see the opportunity to strip ourselves bare of the notion of our own righteousness that stands before us, to empty ourselves of our false pride. With the normal distractions of our lives now mostly quieted for the moment, there's an unexpected giftedness of time that enables us to present ourselves before God with humbleness and confess with an earnest heart, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. In the Passion reading we listened to earlier, we take time to bring to life and recall the story of betrayal, abandonment, and the adamant demands for Jesus' crucifixion. We recall the conflict within Judaism and among the Jews at that time in history. It made me think, is this really just an act of memory when we join in the reading shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him"? I'm convinced that our task today is a bit harder than just remembering this event only through the lens of 2,000 years ago. We are called and pulled to remember that Jesus is still being crucified today. Every single day of our lives, Jesus is still crucified. And we often have such difficulty, or maybe, just maybe, we choose not to make the connection Today, on this day above all days, is the day to remember our own real-world complicity in the shouts of "Crucify him." Every time we turn away from the issues of poverty or fail to address the absolute draconian policies that keep the poor poor, Jesus is crucified. When we tout our privilege in the faces of the poor while we fight over toilet paper or simply take more than we actually need from the food shelves, Jesus is crucified. Right now, we're singing the praises of all of the workers at Costco and Safeway, Target or Walmart, or wherever we shop. But we forget so quickly. We weren't singing those praises back in February, or heck, even last year, when those very same people were advocating, actually begging for fair living wages, health care benefits, sick time, or to just have some paid days for rest and relaxation without losing pay from their already paltry paychecks. Instead, we demean the working poor. We say they expect too much for their non-skilled jobs. Again, Jesus is crucified. We choose to remain unaware and in so many ways unmoved. Every time we ignore the vast needs of our vulnerable communities, when we stand fast in our misunderstanding and arrogance around issues of inequality, not only with the poor, but for black and brown people who have been disenfranchised and subjugated for hundreds of years, Jesus is crucified all over again. Jesus is crucified all around the world on a daily basis. He is crucified on the streets of our cities on a daily basis, but more pointedly, Jesus is also crucified in our lives and hearts on too regular a basis. We know that our world is broken in so many ways, and that our streets bleed far too often. And now we have this pandemic wiping out lives at alarming rates, particularly among the poor. We hear more and more news stories about the ravaging effects of COVID-19 throughout black and brown communities. No, this pandemic certainly isn't about race, but statistics along race and class lines clearly indicate that there is little mercy for those who always seem to get stuck on the bottom rung of a forever broken ladder. And I know that there is really good work going on all around our diocese with continued outreach programs and modified in new ways, but we still too often fall short of what we can do. These outreach programs are vital, life-giving, and important, but sometimes we have to take the next step and do more to help get actual policies and laws changed that give people, all people, the means to maintain and live their lives in an equitable, just, and dignified manner. It very well may be that we simply don't understand or recognize that some of our choices keep us far away from the people God intends us and desires us to be. Beloveds, this is hard, but it is people like you and me that crucify Jesus on too regular a basis. And yet, despite all our failings and shortcomings, God doesn't give up on us. No matter the situation or circumstance, God remains close to us, closer than we realize. Despite our own brokenness and blindness, God fulfills his promise to us through his most beloved Son, Jesus. Jesus came and lived as one of us, and in full obedience to God, he suffered death upon the cross for each of us. This was the very purpose Jesus came into the world, to die. To die for us so that we could have everlasting life in him and with God. Death upon the cross. The dean in his sermon on Palm Sunday called Jesus' sacrifice on the cross an epic act of love. Well, I think this love is way beyond epic, way beyond radical. This is a love that knows no boundaries. It's a love that has no stipulations, no conditions. It's a love that surpasses the confines of any words, and a love expressed in an unsurpassable action. No one is excluded from this love. And because of this love, we should all be forever different, forever a changed people. The cross is about faithfulness, sacrifice, risk, servanthood, and our commitment to one another and to God. It no longer stands as a symbol for oppression or humiliation or death, but instead it represents forgiveness, reconciliation, and hope. Jesus nailed to the cross, broken and exposed to all of humanity. This was his gift of love to us. And now we are called to carry his cross of love into the broken world, into those places where hopelessness, despair, and darkness thrive, to go to those places where God is never expected to show up. We are meant to carry his cross of love deep in our own lives and hearts. Jesus' cross of love reminds all of those who mourn and weep that he too knows what suffering means. He wants us to remember that he wasn't removed or set aside from the world, but was of the world like all of us. More so, he wants us to remember that from his cross of agony and despair, we can find strength, renewal of spirit, and resurrection of new life. Let us look to the cross. If not with gladness of heart, then at least with the sure understanding, knowing that Christ has gone before us and that by his blood we are given new life. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed not only the world, but each one of us. So on this day and the days to come, let us place ourselves before God as living sacrifices, holy and pure, and say, Lord, in my hand no price I bring, simply to your cross I cling. Amen.